I've got one flame to burn, one race that I can say I ran.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 21047.com podcast. My name is Keith Cartwright. I am the host of this show, and I'm really glad to have you along listening in today, this day after Christmas. So wherever it is that you're listening, and whenever it is that you might be listening in, I am just glad to have you along listening. Merry Christmas, and in advance, Happy New Year to everybody out there listening. Today's episode is sponsored by my friend Kimberly Caldwell. Kimberly sponsors me through the Patreon platform. Patreon is a place where fans, listeners, readers, supporters of different missions can go and offer a financial partnership. And so Kimberly has done that for quite some time now, so I'm really thankful to have her continuing to support the 21047.com mission. One of the things we are gearing up for here in just a few weeks, I'll be headed to Houston to run my second marathon, and that is really in large part because of a lot of these Patreon supporters who have been behind me this past 9-10 months, however long I've been in this now, but they jumped behind this effort I had to support the Hurricane Harvey victims down in Texas in partnership with the St. Andrew's Episcopal Church down there. And so they helped me kick off this campaign that a lot of other folks joined in and supported financially. Even though they aren't Patreon supporters, they gladly and generously stepped up and supported the Houston effort. So that will be taking place January 14th, again down in Houston. I'll be running my second marathon, the second one that I swore I would never run. So that's where I'll be going. So anyhow, thank you, Kimberly Caldwell. We'll be talking a little bit more about Houston and the next couple of episodes to come leading up to Houston. And so I look forward to sharing more of that story. This episode, I always like to say this podcast is about just sharing the strength that I have found in my running journey, the hope that I have found in it, and in the stories of some people that I get to meet along the way. The one incredible thing about this running journey is that I get to partner and become aware of a lot of different running journeys out there and running stories. And recently, a friend of mine who I used to work with down in North Carolina, Jenny Cahoon, she sent me a Facebook message, and in it contained a clip of The Ellen Show. Now, I'll tell you, I don't watch The Ellen Show, so I really had no idea what to expect when I started watching this clip. But what she showed me was the clip of this story of a man who had been hit while out riding his bike, and then just this incredible journey, this incredible friendship that was born between, one, the guy, Dean Otto, who was hit, and the man who hit him, Will Huffman, and then the doctor, Matt McGurr, that worked on Dean. The three of them formed this story, this friendship that is just hard to believe. But it was all out there on the Ellen Show. I watched this thing, and I was just completely taken in by it. And I knew right then and there I had to find Dean Otto to get him on the show to talk about that story that I had seen on that clip of the Ellen Show. And I think my friend Jenny knew when she sent me that clip, that's exactly what I would be doing. I would be hunting Dean Otto down with my sleuthing FBI hunting skills, or otherwise known, I was going to search for him on Facebook. And I found him. He was gracious enough to almost immediately respond, "Sure, I'd love to help you out, share my story." And so we connected, and pretty soon after, we set a time to do a phone interview, and that's what you're going to get to hear today. It's the perfect sort of Christmas time story. A lot of faith, a lot of forgiveness, just a lot of being willing to accept kind of where we are in life, accept the challenges we have, embrace the help that's around us, and celebrating each other. There's just so much in this story, and more than I just said there. So I'm anxious for you to listen to it, take your own sort of themes away from it. And I'll turn you over to my conversation with Dean Otto now. Take it away. Well, I want to welcome Dean Otto to the 21047.com podcast. So welcome, Dean.
Oh, thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so this story came to me through a friend shared a clip from an Ellen episode that you were on. And so this whole story starts with the morning of September 24th, 2016. It sounds like an ordinary morning. You're heading out on a bike ride. And so why don't you take that story from there for me?
So most Saturday mornings, I either, go for a run or go for a bike ride first thing in the morning. And this morning was no different, other than the fact that I'd been overseas in London on business for the week, and I had run a half marathon over there, the Richmond Half Marathon in Kew Gardens, which is absolutely gorgeous. But unfortunately, I pulled a hamstring while I was over there, and it aggravated a old injury from the 2015 New York Marathon. And so I called my coach on my way back, and I said, I've done it again. We tried everything. What can I do? And my coach, Kelly Philnow, who's a world-class triathlete in her own right and an awesome coach, said, look, Dean, let's just take you off of, running for a month, and we're just going to bike and swim. So instead of going for a run that morning, I went for a bike ride. And 12 hours later, I was in the hospital. But, to get to the point, so that morning was a little bit different. There was a new moon, so it was super dark outside, and it was also the end of September, and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it's pretty humid here up until probably the end of October. So very humid that morning and very dark. And I put on a reflective vest with flashing LED lights. I had a light on the back of my bike, and I had reflective socks on. It wasn't quite light yet that morning. It was about 6:20 when I took off from my house, and I got about a mile from my house, and I literally turned the bike around because I was having a hard time seeing. And I just had this weird sense that, it was dark and it was hard to see the road. But then I was like, you know what, Dean, just go ahead and get your workout done. It's going to be light in a matter of minutes, and you're going to be fine. So turned back around, headed back out, and was heading uptown, which is north from my South Charlotte home. And I turned left on a road called Providence Road, ironically, and got about 500-600 yards down the road, and 3 cars came flying by me on my left side. They were going really fast, and I was concerned. I kind of looked over. I'm like, why are those guys going so fast? And when I turned my attention back to the road, I understand this is a 2-lane in each direction divided road, so it's a 4-lane road that would normally be busy during the day, but at 6 o'clock in the morning, there wasn't anybody on it. And, the 3 cars go whizzing by me. I refocused my attention to the road. And about that time, I heard brakes lock up, and I felt the impact. And that's when when I lost consciousness, my lights went out. And I woke up in the middle of Providence Road at the corner of Providence and Wendover, laying with my feet tangled up in my bike. I couldn't feel anything from my belly button down, and I had 2 guys standing over me that were, pretty young guys in their late 20s, kind of freaking out, wondering, what the heck had just happened.
And so you're laying there. Clearly, I imagine you're a little bit dazed, but you can't
right.
you can't feel anything from the waist down. And so I'm just wondering, what are the initial thoughts going through your head at that point? Because I got to tell you, from a guy on the outside looking in, just trying to imagine being in that situation. And I do a lot of running and, being out there. And actually, my running journey started with a young mom in our community about almost 4 years ago now. She was hit and killed by a drunk driver while she was out training for the Boston Marathon. She was really an accomplished runner. We're a real small community here. So that rocked our community. She left behind her husband and then 3 very young children. I've got 9 and 11-year-old boys myself. But I often wonder about being in that position. Obviously, tragically, she didn't make it. But right. I just wonder, you're laying there. What are the initial thoughts going through your head?
Robert, I was just like you said, I was a little bit dazed, but I wasn't scared. I lead a pretty spiritual life, and I was never, I wasn't panicking. I've been in a couple situations in my life that have been life-threatening, and for some reason, for me, when that happens, things slow down for me, and I didn't panic at all, and I just looked up at these guys, and the first thing I said to them were, "Did you not see me?" I mean, I was a little mad because, I'd put on all this protective gear and I had a helmet on, and I mean, that truly saved my life, but they said no. We were about 15 or 20 feet behind you when we finally saw you, and we locked up, the brake. So condensation was on his windshield, and he didn't see me until it was too late. And then at that point, I couldn't feel my legs, but I had a little bit of movement in that, and I didn't know this at the time, so I didn't know how bad my injury was because I couldn't see the big hump in my back, nor could I, have known that, I had two vertebrae that were shattered, and they were pinching against my spinal cord. But I could move my hip flexors a little bit, and so at that point, I didn't know that I was really paralyzed. All I knew that I was totally numb, and I couldn't feel anything. I mean, once I got to the hospital, they perform these tests on you where they use a safety pin, and they use the point of it to push on you. They use the round end of it to push on you, and then they take a Q-tip and they brush on you. And those are three different sensations. And I scored a 0 out of 5 on all those. So I had no, sensory feeling at all. I couldn't move anything, and I couldn't feel anything. But there wasn't any time where I didn't think that I was going to get fixed, whether it was going to be, the doctors that fixed me, whether God was going to fix me, or a combination of all the different people that came into my life that day that helped fix me. I had faith from the beginning.
Yeah. So there was never one moment, even laying there on the ground, where you considered the possibility that you weren't ever going to ride a bike again. No,
it really wasn't. I mean, it just sounds kind of crazy, but honestly, I didn't. I mean, I'm a very positive person, and I'm in sales, so I have to be positive.
Right.
You got to take the good with the bad, and this was just, it's like, okay, I get up on the bike. What's next? What's the next thing I need to do to get better? And, that was go to the hospital.
Yeah, so, and I was reading part of your story. It sounds like this was you're in Charlotte. Sounds like this was the time where the Keith Scott shooting had gone on. There was a lot of rioting, so I guess part of the benefit
Correct.
of that was there was a lot of emergency personnel around, and I read where it only took them 4 minutes to respond to you and then get you to the hospital.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They were there in about 3 or 4 minutes, and that was the police, and they secured the accident scene, and then another 3 or 4 minutes later, the medical folks got there, the medic ambulance, and they were able to put a collar on me and take me to a backboard, which then they flipped over, put on a gurney, loaded me up, and sent me to the emergency room, which was also only 2 miles away. I mean, I was 2 miles from a level 1 trauma center, which is this is the only one within the entire region. So a lot of little miracles happened along the way that got me into the hands of the folks that could take care of me. And, I'm a firm believer that wasn't a coincidence.
Right. So you get into the hands of these folks who start taking care of you. And so talk to me a little bit about what they're finding, what sort of prognosis they're giving you in those early moments.
Right. So, Robert, they weren't saying much at all. I mean, they were very concerned. They were very guarded. And I was asking them, I'm like, well, how bad is it? Am I ever going to walk again? And they were just like, Dean, look, we don't know. We've got to run a lot of tests on you to find out how bad the damage was. But, you've had a very severe spinal cord injury and other broken bones. And in fact, I had 2 shattered vertebrae that were pushing on my spinal cord. Miracle that it didn't puncture the dura that surrounds the spinal cord, which is the protective sheath that protects it. And, if you penetrate that dura, you lose spinal cord fluid and you're paralyzed because it starts basically tearing into your spinal cord and shredding it. So that's bad. So that wasn't going on, but the impingement was going on. The vertebrae were shattered. My pelvis and my tailbone were fractured. I had a broken fibula and a broken left rib. So I was in pretty bad shape. But I didn't know how bad a shape I was in because it was all, I wasn't bleeding very much. In fact, I had 0 road rash below my waist. I didn't have a mark on my legs. I had, some road rash on my left cheek, all down my left arm and on my knuckles. But that was it, and my shoulder. That was it. That was the only visible signs. In fact, when I listened to the emergency 911 call, they were just like, "Yeah, he looks fine," They hadn't seen them take the shirt off of me where there was this giant hump in my back, where my back was not only fractured, but it was dislocated. So, there was a lot of bad stuff going on.
And so at some point in this process and checking you out, it sounds like, I believe it was your surgeon who ultimately, or somebody told you that probably a 1% to 2% chance that you would walk again. Is that right?
Well, that's right, Robert, but they didn't tell me that until way later. So, a surgeon's job and a doctor's job it's a delicate balance. They've got to be truthful with you, but at the same time, they have to give you hope. So I didn't meet Matt until after the surgery. The first time he laid eyes on me, I was face down on his operating table with my back opened up, and, he was getting ready to start to work on me. But afterwards, they had told this to my wife and my family that, this was a really bad deal, and there was a good chance that I was going to, be in a wheelchair. And there was basically a 1% to 2% chance that I would ever walk again, much less run again. And I didn't find that out really until about 4 days afterwards. But what I did find out after the surgery, my surgeon, Matt McGirt, asked me to wiggle my toe, see if I could wiggle my toes right after the surgery to see if there was any, motor or sensory capability that had been restored to me as a result of the surgery, and I was able to barely move my right toe. So that was the first sign that I had any chance at all to make a recovery.
So then you start down this path. It sounds like, and you've already said yourself, you're a pretty positive guy. You had a good outlook on this thing. You start tackling the rehabilitation, and if I read the story right, in 48 hours you were up on your feet.
I was on a walker, I think, yes, in 48 or 72 hours. The second or third day, I was on a walker, walked about 2 or 3 steps to the bathroom, toughest 2 or 3 steps I've ever taken, super painful, but, I was on my way. And the next day, I made it to the door. The next day, I made it a few steps down the hall. The next day, they kicked me out, and I was in the rehab facility and was literally walking up and down these 2 different steps. In fact, I had one of my medical team, I call them, because I've got a lot of different people that have helped me, but a guy by the name of Scott Greenapple, who's an awesome chiropractor as well as an acupuncturist, he came in and he was like, "Dean, this is a freaking miracle. I can't believe that you're getting around as well as you are. I've looked at your charts and your x-rays, and this is just, there's nothing to explain this." And, I just kept defying the odds at every step. And, I don't believe that's a coincidence either. I had a lot of help, and I thank God, just blessed me and my family with an unbelievable outcome.
Yeah, and how did you? Because you say in those first couple of steps were really painful. I have to believe in those early days, early weeks, that there were tough days mentally. How did you keep yourself in the mindset that I'm gonna get back to running, I'm gonna get back to biking, I'm getting through this thing?
I just never had any doubt. Literally. I put my mind to, whenever I put my mind to something, I make it happen. And I knew if I worked hard enough and I did what they told me to do, that I was going to have a chance. And the way I looked at it is, I had a short window to get back as much of everything that I lost as I could. And so I had to work that much harder to get it back faster. So, I was in an inpatient rehab facility, Carolina's Medical Center's rehab, that's adjacent to the hospital here in Charlotte. And then I was there for 2 weeks, and then I was in outpatient rehab at Carolina's Neurosurgery and Spine Associates under the care of Graham Clater, who was my physical therapist, and I was with him 3 days a week. And plus I had, Kelly Philnow that was putting together workout plans for me 6 days a week on top of that. So she had adapted my running and triathlon training to where I was, now basically starting to walk a little bit and doing some walks. And I actually walked a 5K that I'd signed up for about 3 months before my accident, 4 weeks after my accident. So I didn't quite run it. And I didn't break 20 minutes in it like my goal was to do prior to the accident. But I did walk in it 4 weeks to the day after my accident, which I thought was pretty cool.
That is amazing. I had read where you ran a 5K, but I didn't realize it was 4 weeks later.
Well, 4 weeks later, I walked the 5K, and then about 3.5 or 4.5 months later, I ran a 5K with the guy that hit me, Will Huffman, and his wife Janelle. So listen to this. So I'm on a workout in January at a park called McAlpine Park and Greenway here in Charlotte. It was beautiful, and it was really windy that day, and I decided I was almost finished with the workout, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to go over into the trees and finish my sprints, which weren't really sprints, but they were just a little faster running at that point.
Right.
And because it was super windy, and when I, again, no coincidences, I go off into the woods, and there's Will and Janelle walking their dogs. I mean, go figure.
Right.
And so I stop and we greet each other and, ask how each other's doing. And I said, look, I'm training for my comeback race, and in like a month, it's a 5K. Well, why don't you guys run it with me? And they're like, totally, we're in. So on that day, we decided that, that was going to be the comeback race, and they were going to run it with me. And so they came to the race. Both sides of their families were at the race. My son came in from Chapel Hill, where he goes to school at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. They all painted up signs. I mean, it was really unbelievable. It was such a special day to be able to do that. And, not only did I run the 5K, but I beat both of them, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, good for you. That is an interesting relationship there. You and Will Huffman, the young kid, you said he's in his 20s, and I saw one of the video clips, and he absolutely looks like a young kid in his 20s.
Yep.
And I, again, tried to put myself in his shoes in a couple of different places. Obviously, in the immediate aftermath of that, when he hit you, I can't imagine the sort of panic that's going through his mind. Sounds like it was helped by the fact that you were worse off than you looked. So maybe that helped him stay calm in that moment. But then in the aftermath, when knowing, and I don't know how much he saw of your struggle to get through this rehab, I don't know how you, and I always think about that again with the man who hit the young woman in our community. Again, it's a completely different situation. He made some bad choices to get in the vehicle, but nonetheless, I don't know how you ever get rid of the image of hitting another person. So tell me a little bit about what you know about what he went through in the aftermath and how you all got to a point that quickly where you're in a park and you're all talking about running a comeback race together.
Well, first of all, I mean, he's a pretty special guy to begin with. Will wasn't doing anything wrong. He wasn't texting. He wasn't drinking. We were both in the wrong place at the wrong time. And it was an unfortunate circumstance that he didn't see me. And luckily he had a longtime friend with him that was a very calming force, a good friend of his that he went to school with. had come into town, and they were literally driving up to Blacksburg, Virginia, to go to the Virginia Tech football game that morning, and that's why they were leaving at 6:30, so they could get up there before the game. I think it was about a noon game. It's about a 3 or 4 hour drive. So he's a good kid. He would started the honor program at Virginia Episcopal School where he went to school, and after he hit me, it's basically wrecked his day, obviously, but he sought out through Facebook to find out, how he could contact me. And he ended up finding my coach, Kelly Philnow, through Facebook, through pictures she'd posted of me and athletic accomplishments or whatever. And he asked Kelly if he could come see me. So Kelly's like, I don't know. Let me find out. So Kelly called Beth, my wife, and I said, sure. I mean, I'd love to see him. I mean, I forgave him right there at the moment in my heart, but I want to forgive him in person, because that could have been me. That could have been my kid. That could have been my wife. That could have been anybody, that day that just had an accident. And right. I can't imagine what it would be like to carry that around. I mean, it was bad enough getting hit by the truck, but I didn't see it coming. And to be on the delivering end of that blow, and to be, the good person that he is and the stand-up person, he didn't have to stop. I mean, 70% of the people that are in these types of accidents, that are the hittor, they don't stop. So he stopped. Not only did he stop, but he, stayed there and was there until they whisked us away in the ambulance. And then he sought me out to apologize. And who am I to judge? I think I was able to rid myself of resentment at that point by forgiving Will, and I think it gave him some closure, to be able to see us, me and my wife, 8 days after the accident. He and Janelle came to my rehab room. I'd already been kicked out of the hospital because I was progressing so fast, and they came by to see rehab, and they visited with us for 2 hours. So it wasn't like a, hey, really sorry, see you later. I mean, we kind of hit it off right off the bat.
And I've taken in, once I read about your story, I got pretty fascinated with it. And so you've been featured, the Ellen Show. There was, I believe it was an NBC Sunday morning show. There are several newspaper articles. Right. And almost all of them, if not all of them, really focus strongly, if not pretty much exclusively, on this idea of forgiveness, as if there's some surprise that so quickly you were able to forgive him. I was thinking about that today. I'm curious from your standpoint, why do you think there is such, a draw to this idea of the forgiveness in your story? What do you think makes your story so compelling that people like me want to talk to you about it?
It's got so many different elements, Robert. I mean, there's that forgiveness part. It's the acceptance part of, accepting life on life's terms, and understanding that, God's got a plan for you, and, you're not in charge and he is, and turn it over to him as quickly as you can. And generally the results are pretty good. And that's what I did, laying there on the road, said a little prayer, and forgave, Will in my heart. And it turned out pretty well. And the relationship that I've struck with Janelle and his wife, the relationship that I've, struck with my surgeon and his wife. I mean, Matt and Laura McGirt are good friends of ours now. We see them regularly. We have dinner with them. Matt and I run together. I mean, it's an amazing story of faith and friendship and forgiveness that's and acceptance and gratitude and so many different elements that are in this story. And I think that's what makes the story so unique.
Yeah, you said something a minute ago, and well, there's a couple of things on that line of thinking. Early on you said you had started off on this ride and you thought about turning around. Something maybe told you to turn around. You said, no, I'm gonna keep going. And then a little bit ago you said you and Will were just sort of in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'm curious if you've ever considered the idea given how many people have been moved by your story. I think the Ellen clip itself has been seen several million times. Do you ever consider the idea that maybe you all were in the right place at the right time?
Yeah, I knew that's what you were going to say, Robert, before it came out of your mouth. As soon as you started, you're right. I mean, it really, bad choice of words on my part. Again, it's really, that was God's plan, and that's how it was executed. So who am I to be the judge of whether it's right or wrong? It is what it is, and it's what brought us together. It's what's, told this incredible story that's touched so many lives, and there's almost not a day that goes by still that I don't get a text or a Facebook message or a LinkedIn message or some type of outreach, an email from somebody that was like, wow, I saw your story, and man, that really inspired me. That really moved me. And, I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
I told Ellen this, and I told, Harry Smith this on the Today Show, and anybody else that will listen, I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, this has been such an amazing journey for me and for my family and for the loved ones around me. I mean, I've been able to basically go to my own funeral without dying because, I've seen and lived through an outpouring of love and support for me that you don't usually see unless, people are going to your funeral. And I got to live it and breathe it and feel it and see it. And it's really special. It's been an amazing journey. And, do I still have a little bit of neuropathy in my feet? Yes, I do. Do they get numb if I sit very long? Yes, they do. But everything else works. Everything, I have back all functionality that I had before the accident. So that's great. And I've touched all these lives, and I've, raised over $60,000, hopefully soon to be $80,000 for, a program that helps people with spinal cord injuries. So to me, yeah, it's all part of God's plan, and it happened just the way it did. So I'm glad you brought that point up.
Yeah, no, and I surely wouldn't expect you to adopt the idea I was in the right place at the right time, but just the way you talk, I mean, you say I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but the whole rest of the story would say, like I said, maybe there was a lot of right going on. I'm also curious, Dean, because, again, you and I share a faith. My life is in God's hands. He's just core to everything I am and everything I stand for. I've not been through something like you have, but every day at some point I try to tell myself I'm fully prepared for something like that. Did you ever run scenarios like this through your head beforehand, and did you carry a confidence that you were prepared for a moment like that? And what in your life faith-wise really had kind of got you to that point? Because I think we all say that, but then all of a sudden you're laying on an operating table, and then the faith game is really on at that point. Then it's no longer faith talk, it's faith in action. I'm just curious what in your life prepared you for that sort of faith in action.
Yeah, well, I don't know that you can ever practice that moment to be ready for it, Robert. But I will share this with you. I'm in recovery, and I've been sober for over 8 years. And, part of, getting sober was learning about accepting, life on life's terms and handing things over to God and, developing a spirituality and a faith and, being able to forgive those that you feel have wronged you so you don't carry around resentments that, could lead you back into a life of active addiction. And, that's if I hadn't had that part in my story, I'm not equipped to deal with this situation like I've been able to deal with it. So, yeah, I mean, that's the training that I had that got me ready for this, but I don't think you can really run scenarios through your head of what happens if this happens, how am I going to handle it? I think you basically take it, as it comes.
Yeah. Wow. And that's, really this podcast, my running journey. I ran my first full marathon last November. I'm 53. Certainly not.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Certainly not your typical runner. Running's been a struggle for me, but after I I finished that marathon. I ran that marathon with the scripture 2 Timothy 4:7 on my back. I've fought the good fight. I've finished the race. I've kept the faith. And after I got done with that marathon, God just put it on my heart that, there's something beyond this running journey. There's a message beyond it. And that message really has become for me this parallel that, so much of running is in the training, and it is a struggle, but it's always preparing us for whether it be the next run or whether it be for a finish line. And your story, and especially the piece you just shared, really brings that out for me, that life is just exactly the same way, and our faith journey probably even more so, that it is these struggles and these hardships along the way that are building us and preparing us for other life moments down the road. So I really appreciate you sharing that part of your story with us.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Couldn't agree more with you, Robert. I mean, that's spot on.
Yeah. And so this is, I got to tell you, when my friend sent this clip to me of you and the Ellen Show, so you were with Will Huffman and your surgeon, who is Matt. What's Matt's last name again?
Dr. Matt McGurr.
Matt McGurr. So the three of you were on the Ellen Show, and you all talked about running a half marathon together. But at that point, I don't think you had, because you didn't talk about how that went. So as soon as I watched the Ellen clip, I had to go find a clip to see how that half marathon went. And I'll be honest with you, I was in tears when I got done watching it. Because number one, like I said, I ran my own marathon. I'll have to send you a clip of that. I had probably 25 friends walking with me, because trust me, when I finished it, I was Will Huffman coming down the stretch of my marathon, baby. They were holding me up and dragging me home. But man, they were with me to finish it. So
that's awesome.
You all, the three of you, crossed that finish line together. You and Matt, Dr. Matt, went back to get Will. How did that whole idea that the three of you are going to run a half marathon together, how was that idea even born?
Well, we just, I basically challenged Matt about 4 days after my accident to run a half marathon. I asked him if he'd ever run. He said he'd only run 3 or 4 miles, is the farthest he'd run, because he was a sprinter at Duke in college. And, he didn't run long distances. I said, I'll tell you what, look, I just ran a half marathon over in London, and as soon as I'm able, and I know I'm going to be able, why don't you and I get together and run a half marathon and try to raise, a bunch of money for spinal cord injury patients. And he said, Dean, if you can pull off a half marathon, I've got no excuse, and I'll certainly run it with you. So that's where it started. And then after the 5K that I ran with Will and Janelle, I came back to Matt and I'm like, look, dude, we gotta see if Will will run this half marathon with us and make it, all three of us together. That'd be a pretty cool story. And
had Will ever run a half marathon?
Oh God, no. He'd never run one. I don't know how far he had run, but he ran cross country in high school. He wasn't, and using his words, he wasn't much of a runner, but he got out there and like we said earlier, it's all about the journey. So Will was all in. I mean, he not only was he all in, I mean, I think Will would have died out on that course trying to finish that race with us. It was cool that morning. It was about 49 degrees when we started, but it was like 85 at the end, and that's over a 2 hour, or in my case, an hour and 59 minutes and 55 seconds later. It was super hot, and, he was dehydrated. He also didn't tell us that he had a heart condition when he was a kid and had surgery. And, after he crossed the finish line, his heart rate would not go below 100. We had him back we had an Airbnb, and he was back on the couch, and I took my heart rate monitor off, obviously after the race, but I put it on him, and so we could monitor his heart because it wouldn't go below 100. And we thought we were going to take him to the emergency room, but finally, after about 4 hours, his heart rate got back down closer to normal, and he was okay. But, I mean, you talk about struggling. I mean, that kid struggled, and he was not going to be denied. He basically, stopped and helped me when I was laying in the middle of the road. So why shouldn't I go back and help him finish this race that I got him into?
And when I share this, I'll link the video to that story. The picture, the image of watching the three of you cross that finish line together was it was emotional to watch. I can't imagine the emotions that went through all of your hearts and heads as you crossed that finish line together, you and Matt for the second time with Will.
Right, yeah, it was unbelievable. I mean, that was a year to the day after my accident, and it was a hell of a journey.
Yeah.
And it was amazing that we were able to share that moment together, that our wives were out there, with us. I mean, we had the Today Show that was out there, capturing all of it. They had drones following us around during the race. We had a community that was fully supporting us. We were on the front page of the Napa newspaper that Saturday before the Sunday race, and we had people stopping us in the middle of the street, coming and taking selfies with us. And, we had a guy that invited us to his winery for a private tasting and tour, and it was just amazing. I mean, the outpouring of support for Napa was amazing. And then, a week later, the place that we had our last dinner, which was called the Fremont Diner, burned to the ground, because they had all those fires that were out there. So, I was emailing those folks and checking on them and making sure that they were okay. But incredible. I mean, incredible story. And, another aside, I mean, I ate this brand of yogurt, every single day for basically a year afterwards. And I don't know if you've ever had this yogurt. For some reason, it's the top of my head. I can't think of it right now. But the yogurt's got more protein in it than any other yogurt that's out there. And so I knew that I needed a lot of protein to help help my bones heal.
Right.
And so I found this yogurt, and I ate it every single day. And I sent a picture of myself to the head of marketing of the company.
Yeah.
And the name of the yogurt's Noosa. And they were, blown away by my story. They sent me a bunch of T-shirts, a water bottle. They sent me a brand new pair of shoes before the race. They featured me in their, social media. It was pretty cool. I was very grateful for them. And they sent me a stack of coupons for Noosa yogurt. Basically said, you're never going to pay for Noosa yogurt again. We're going to keep your refrigerator full. Yeah, so it was pretty cool to see that kind of support, from everybody.
I got to tell you something too. So it was lost on me the first time, the first couple of times I watched that news clip of you all finishing the race, and I think you just repeated it. If I heard it right today, you ran that half marathon in under 2 hours.
I did, and I didn't, my goal, which was kind of a crazy goal, was to try to break 2 hours in this half marathon. And I'd run 2 years prior to that. I ran the New York half, I think, in an hour and 37 minutes. And, I knew that I was nowhere ever going to be able to run it, nearly that fast. But I thought 2 hours was certainly respectable. So that was my goal. And it was kind of a, big, hairy, audacious goal. And about halfway through the race, I looked at my watch and I looked at Matt and I'm like, we're 2 minutes ahead of schedule here. Let's, keep at it. We've got a shot to break 2 hours. And he's like, oh, I'm in. I mean, he could have beat me pretty handily that day. He was an unbelievable friend and stayed with me the entire time, whether he was get a little bit ahead of me to kind of motivate me or drop back and sort of help me along, because it was hard. About halfway in it, I was really tired, and he asked me how I was doing. I said, I'm doing great, but I wasn't doing great. I was tired. And, Napa's hilly. It's Napa Valley. So on both sides of the valley, there are hills, and you're running up and down the hills. And we were about 11 miles in, so we've got 2.1 miles to go. And I had, I think, 20 minutes to finish the race to be able to break it. And it was tough because we had like 4 hills in the last 2 miles, and we get to the top of the last hill, and I could see the finish line, and I just took off, and I just put the hammer down, and he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Go, let's go." So we take off, and we cross the finish line, and I'm completely exhausted. I stopped my watch, and I looked down. My watch said 1:59:55. I'd beaten my goal by 5 seconds, which was, I mean, it was an incredible feeling. I didn't think there was any chance I was ever going to be able to do that, but it was just kind of a storybook ending to a storybook year.
Yeah, well, you're talking to a guy who was thrilled when he broke 2 hours and 30 minutes last year, and that's without having
great.
My spine cut in half. And so when I heard that, I thought, well, this guy is an impressive athlete, which I'm sure was part of your pretty miraculous recovery.
Yeah, I think being in the shape I was in certainly, helped my ability to bounce back from, a pretty catastrophic event. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes people call it prehab, so if you're going to have back surgery or something, you'll start working out beforehand to get in shape so you bounce back from the surgery, more quickly. And little did I know that, all my training, really was going to be an integral part of my recovery.
Well, Dean, I really I appreciate you taking time out. I know you've probably shared this story many, many times. I thank you for doing it because I'm just telling you, I'm a guy here in Virginia that a friend I hadn't talked to in a long time saw it and shared it with me. So I think it's being shared pretty wide, and if it's touching people's lives, even a fraction as much as it has touched mine, just reading it and now just being blessed with the chance to talk to you. I hope you'll keep sharing it, and God will keep opening doors for you to do that, my friend.
Well, thanks very much. Those are very kind words, Robert. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your interest in the story, and I'm glad to share it with you and share it with as many people as I can. It's an unbelievable story. I mean, you definitely couldn't write it if you tried.
Yeah, and I really appreciate this idea where you say you wouldn't change a thing about it. And I think that's where that faith piece comes in. I was telling somebody the other day, and I've had similar struggles, it sounds like, that you've had along your way. And I told somebody the other day that if God gave me a chance just to erase a decade out of my life, it would certainly be the decade of my 20s. It was a decade filled with pretty destructive and poor choices, to put it the kindest way. But the flip side to that is God would say to me, that's the exact decade I'm using to build your influence in this world. So I think that's pretty much the case of what's happening with you here, and I'm just grateful you're doing it.
Well, my pleasure, Robert. I'm glad to be able to share it.
Hey, and I read in one of those.
Thanks.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. And I read in one of those stories that Will Huffman lives up here in Richmond. Is that right?
He does. Yeah, Will moved away about 4 or 5 months ago. In fact, he was just in town a couple of days ago. His wife's she's from Wisconsin. She's a huge Green Bay Packers fan. And for her birthday a few months ago, he bought her tickets to the game, and they came down and went to the game. And didn't get to visit with him this time, but I'm sure we'll see him here really soon.
Yeah,
in fact, I know we're gonna be with them out in Arizona. Stryker Spine, who put together, makes the titanium that's in my back that put me back together, flew myself and Matt out last year, and I spoke to their 500 sales reps at their national sales meeting, and they're flying us back out again this year, sort of a recap story, and they're bringing Will too, so it'll be a lot of fun. We'll get to spend a weekend with them out in Phoenix.
Well, we do a big, like I said, and I'll invite you to the big Facebook group that honors Meg, the young woman in our community. I think you'd love this community of runners. But every year we do some pretty big events around the Richmond Marathon up here in November. So maybe we can talk you into coming up here one November and sharing in our story up here.
Hey, I'd be happy to. I'd be honored to. That's very kind of you to ask that. That's great.
Well, you've got it on my mind now, brother. So you can count on me following it up. Hey,
that sounds great. Looking forward to it.
Hey, Dean, you have a great night. Thank you again for being so gracious with your time, and God bless you, man.
God bless you too. Thanks, Robert. Take care. Bye-bye.
Buddy. Well, I promised you that was going to be a powerful conversation, and indeed it was. Dean Otto, what an incredible man. What an incredible story. I'm actually going to be having coffee here soon with Will Huffman, and so I look forward to hearing that part of the story as well. Just the whole trio of them and how their lives intersected, and sort of just this an unexpected way, but you can see God in that story weaving something very intentional, and I think the intention behind it was for all of us to hear this story, to take away something heartwarming and inspiring in it, and probably some things that we can put into our own lives to make our own lives better and increase the opportunities we have and the opportunities that we seize to be involved in other people's lives and create our own stories with and through them. So I'm glad that Dean Otto took the time to share his story with me. And again, it was a powerful, powerful story. Just to see the three of them cross that finish line together, like I said in the podcast, it really brought tears to my eyes, as many of you who listen to this are runners. Many of you have been a part of finish line stories. I certainly could remember my own finish line story, and there's so many emotions that come involved in those individual finish line stories. We're all carrying something to that finish line, whether we're running for somebody, whether we're accomplishing something we never thought we could. I mean, there's just so much emotion behind it. But then to think of the Dean Otto story and Will and Dr. Matt, when all that they had gone through together, pouring that into their own finish line moment, it was just hard for me to imagine the kind of emotion that went through all of them at that particular Napa finish line. So again, Dean, I appreciate you sharing your story. I pray that God will continue to use it in formats well beyond mine, that many lives will be touched by hearing it. And I was serious. I really look forward to trying to get Dean up here to Richmond one day soon to run with a bunch of us up here. So anyhow, Dean, thank you. To all of you again, I wish you a Merry Christmas, if belated. I know it is a little bit, but in advance, I'll go ahead and be prompt and early on this one. A very happy New Year. Big goals, I'm sure, for a lot of people. It's the time of the year, especially for runners. You start thinking about the kind of miles you're going to run next year, the kind of time you're going to shave off your various races. So I wish you all the best with that. Hope in some way in the next year, listening to this show will give you all a little boost, a little inspiration. Maybe you'll see some stories along the way in those races that we can share here on the 21047.com podcast. If you want to learn more about what's happening here, go to the website 21047.com, TWOTIM 47.com. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, like my friend Kimberly Caldwell, who sponsors this episode today, you can go to the homepage and just scroll down. You'll eventually come to the Patreon sort of logo there. Click on it. It will take you to the Patreon page, and you'll see lots of different opportunities for you to partner with me financially there and continue to grow the reach and the spread of the 21047.com reach. So thank you again for everybody who goes there, everybody who listens. You're all supporters to me, and all of it, whether it's financial or just prayers and cheers, it all means a lot to me. So thank you very much. Until next time, I imagine next time we talk, it will be the new year or pretty close to it. So until then, if you're out there running this week, have some good runs. If you're not, get out there and cheer somebody on. There's really nothing quite as powerful as cheering somebody on. And so get out there and do that. And if you don't, if running's just not your thing, well then I am glad to have you along anyways. We have a lot of folks who don't run but come along and listen. So I think there is a lot to pick up here that outside of the running community that can really help folks out as well. So until next time, thank you for listening today to the 21047.com podcast.